That's a dramatic opening. I like it, Alex. Welcome. Good to be with you. It's an exciting panel. I think I, along with everybody else, is interested in learning more about it. So just to sort of finish off the bio, Alex is a serial entrepreneur. He's the founder of 7 New York City-based startups, which has raised more than $1 billion and exited over $3 billion. So obviously quite successful. He's one of the inventors of Voice over Internet Protocol with a foundational patent dating back to 1994. He's currently working on Money over Internet Protocol. He has over 35 patents to his name related to both VoIP protocols, messaging, and communication. Basically, if you look at his patents, have contributed to a lot of the technology and companies that we all take advantage of today: Skype, WhatsApp, Google Voice, and others. So, Alex, welcome. Good to be talking with you.
Thanks, and great to be here. Look forward to enlightening conversation.
Great. So, Alex, maybe just start at the beginning. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your role at Celsius?
Sure. So, Celsius Network is a blockchain-based a platform that basically uses the rails of the blockchain to enable us to earn interest. So anyone who basically has a bank account knows that you can barely get 1%. Like if you really search the planet, you're not going to find 1%. Most banks pay 0.1 to 0.5% interest. And we think that there are much better ways of basically earning yield. So we created a platform where you can download a wallet and deposit digital assets and earn up to 11%, meaning 100 times more than your bank pays you. So now your money works for you instead of you just working for the money. And and I think that is the opportunity that we present that you can't really find anywhere else. Before Celsius, as you mentioned, I've started several tech companies that all were focused either on communication or infrastructure and that relates to the internet.
Yeah. So, Alex, these are great conversations. Obviously, cryptocurrency and blockchain, big topic of conversation. It's actually transcended into the culture, globally. I think it might be helpful, just given you're an expert, if you could level set for us and for the audience at home, quite simply, what is blockchain and what is cryptocurrency?
Yeah, it's hard to put that down into one sentence, but think about it as basically if you think about our financial system today, it's very centralized, right? We have one central bank, and we have maybe 4 banks in the United States that control 60% of all the assets, all the deposits in the United States. So a very, very high concentration that really blocks innovation and blocks it does not allow for the consumer to have any power against the bank, because you have this giant bank and you have zero control over your finances or zero control of your ability to basically have these guys act in your best interest. So this technology called the blockchain has been around actually for 30 years. It's not a new technology. The parts that's new has been the development of this new idea called Bitcoin, which actually put together all of these different great things like a Merkle tree and encryption and all that stuff. And all of that together has created an opportunity for us to take the power away from the banks, from the central bank or from your commercial bank. And you can now act as your own financial institution. So you can actually hold your own assets. You can transfer them to anybody else. You can earn interest. You can pay bills. So all these functions that used to only live in the financial world are now things that can run on a blockchain. And the blockchain is just basically a spreadsheet, right, that is managed by many, many people. So instead of just you having that spreadsheet in your computer, imagine if 10,000 computers have a copy of that spreadsheet.
Distributed ledger, right? That's the foundation of it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's a distributed ledger, but really it's a spreadsheet, right? So it's an immutable spreadsheet. So every time a transaction is registered on the spreadsheet, no one else can change it. Only if everybody's in the consensus, in agreement, then the change can be recorded and everybody accepts that as the truth. So that is something that is new and innovative. and that allows us to do things that we couldn't do before, like, for example, me transferring you digitally assets or value. Because if I send you my picture, for example, a picture of my cat, I get to keep a copy of it, and you get to keep a copy of it, and no one knows which one is the original and which one is not. That works great for a cat, but it doesn't work great if I'm sending you $20, right? So the innovation really of the blockchain is all about preventing what we call the double spend, the fact that you can spend that $20 twice, and enabling millions or billions of people to have access to this platform and still trust everybody else on the platform to make sure that that everybody has the same truth.
Yeah. So I think this kind of, you probably already addressed this, but I assume that notion of your tagline is unbank yourself, right? So it sounds like what you're talking about, Celsius, is sort of liberating yourself from these institutions and take more control. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit further?
Yeah. So if the relationship we have with our banks are really a one-sided relationship. In almost every other business, if you're an unhappy customer, like Amazon does much more for you as a consumer, as a customer, than your bank does, right? And banks have, over many years, have become this exceptional machine that sucks all the profits out of the retail customer and delivers them to the shareholder, right? So JP Morgan, as an example, makes 30 billion a year in profit, and all of that is given to the shareholders and the employees of the bank as either dividends or bonuses or things like that. So the consumer gets nothing. The opposite. They charge you to deposit your money. They charge you to maintain your money. You get an activities fees. You have an ATM. You want to withdraw the money, they charge you for that as well. So when you run your own bank, you charge yourself fees, meaning your money makes money for you, and you get to keep all those profits. So for the first time, suddenly, and in the world we live in, where interest rates are at zero, you can't really earn anything.
Yeah.
There's no alternative, right? So suddenly the blockchain becomes a very attractive alternative to the traditional banking model.
And let me ask you, does Celsius hold large cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, so we currently have about 1.6 billion. So I think there's only one other company that has more assets than us in the entire crypto space. And we're growing very, very fast. Currently, we have about 200,000 users worldwide. But the idea is to really replace the banking system with a new system that is acting in your best interest. And, I'm saying it, most people who listen to me say, come on, Alex, you can't take down the banks. Like, these guys have been around for 700 years. They basically dominate the planet. And for me, it's different because when I took on the phone companies back in '94, they used to charge us crazy rates to call somebody. And here we are talking for free over voice of IP that completely bypassed all the infrastructure that these phone companies had, the TDM network, right, that they created. Why? Because we transitioned all of the communications we've done over IP, right? So the internet is an open protocol, and anyone can do anything, like have this conversation for free. And it's the same thing with the bank. What most people don't understand, that if all of us got together and stopped depositing money with banks, banks lose their power overnight, because the only source of income they have is our deposits. They don't actually make money. They need outside money to do loans or to basically operate all their activities. So my point is that all of us, we the people, have the power. We just don't know it. Just like we the people leaving this or that phone company forced them to move to a different business and allowed us to really communicate almost for free.
So that's a great question, because I was going to ask you, how did you go from voice over IP to money over IP? I mean, other than sort of the internet protocol, it seemed like they're quite different. I think our audience would be interested to hear just your own kind of personal journey, how you got there.
So yeah, if you look at my career, again, this is my 8th startup as a founder. So all of those startups have the same kind of spirit behind them, and it's about doing good and then doing well, right? So besides Arbinet, which was this voice of IP company, for example, I I'm one of the founders of Transit Wireless, which is a company that brought wireless to the subways in New York. You would say, wait a second, didn't the subways have wireless all the time? No, actually for 50 years, you would go into the subways and all you had is a broken payphone. If you had an emergency, you had to run out of the station. And if you got stuck in the train, you were, you didn't have any way to
I'm in New York.
communicate.
I get it. Yeah. Yeah.
So this was another example where, again, the MTA or the operator basically decided that they don't think that the commuters should have wireless service, and no one wanted to spend $300 million to build it, right? So it was a kind of like a catch-22, build it and they will come. And that's what we did. We basically built that infrastructure, brought in the carriers, and provided the service for free to the 8 million people that used to use it every day. Now I think ridership is down like 80%. But the point is that all these things that look impossible are things that are just being held up because no one took the leadership to basically make them happen. The same thing with the banks, right? Most of us take for granted when we see these charges. When we see a bank pay us 0.1%, and then they turn around and lend it to our neighbor on their credit card and charge them 24%. That is lunacy. That is just, for me, that is like, should be illegal, right? So, but, and the funny thing is that today banks charge you more on their credit card, even though their cost of capital dropped by 90%. They're basically getting the money for free from the Fed. They actually increase what they charge you on the credit card compared to 10 years ago. So that should be illegal, but it's not, because the banks are too big to fail and they can basically write their own rules. So the only way to fix that is not to go to Washington or start a lobbying firm or whatever. The way to fix it is create a new system that completely bypasses everything these banks rely on, and cryptocurrencies allow us to do that.
That's terrific. So maybe you can tell us then about the future of money.
Well, the future of money is actually not is in danger, and the reason for that is that I came to this country as an immigrant. I actually grew up, was born in communism, and I grew up in socialism in Israel, and so capitalism for me always was this shiny house at the top of the hill, where all of us looked up and said, "Here's where we're all thriving to be just like these guys," right? And today, if you look at the U.S. economy, partially because of COVID, but also partially because of us printing all this money, since we went off the gold standard, we're not really the economy is not being run by supply and demand. It's not run by the invisible hand. It's actually run by the Fed and the banking system, meaning the Fed kind of cast a net under the U.S. economy to prevent us from collapsing into a depression. And they got to pick the winners and the losers. And in that process, by basically funding companies like airlines and others, and through that process, the net that is holding us up has big holes in it. And all the small businesses fell to the ground and went out of business. So the net is only catching the really large businesses that are too big to fail. And that looks to me just like communism. It looks to me just like socialism. So I understand that these are special circumstances, but 2008 was also special circumstances, and 2000 was special circumstances. So the problem that we're having is that effectively we are reflating ourselves out of trouble by using the golden goose, the US dollar, and we're piling that debt into the future, borrowing from the future, printing money, borrowing from the future, spending it today to alleviate our pressure. And my point is that really the Bitcoin or the Ethereum, all these digital currencies are really competing for the value creation with the US dollar. Today, the US dollar is the reserve currency of the world. And a lot of people think it will be like that forever. But if you look at the last 2,000 years, you would find 15 different reserve currencies. And all of them basically went to zero. All of them went off the gold standard and went to zero. So we are, I think, at the end of the dominance of the US dollar. And you can see China and other countries kind of trying to rise and take over that dominance. But there are other options, right? And we, the people, have to choose. Are we supporting the dollar? Are we supporting cryptocurrencies? or are we supporting some other reserve currency that may come from a different country? So we are at a fork in the road, and each person has to really decide for themselves, am I going to keep all of my assets denominated in dollars, or is the fact that there's $27 trillion worth of unfunded liabilities and over 100 trillion in Medicare and Medicaid, is that going to eat away at my assets? So cryptocurrencies provide a non-correlated assets, right? They're not really connected to the dollar in any way. And actually Bitcoin is the best performing asset compared to the dollar. It's up 9 million% in 11 years. So it's 2,000 times better, did 2,000 times better than any stock on Wall Street during the same period of time. So when you look at it from that perspective, you say to yourself, wow, I should really put aside 5 or 10% of my assets in a non-dollar denominated way. And that's really what Celsius provides. It gives you that basket to be able to do that.
That's interesting. I wish I'd done some of this 11 years ago, but it's fascinating, right? Yeah. So Alex,
but the point is, it's not too late. Most people say that and say, well, and I explain to them that it's not too late because Bitcoin is something you cannot just print, right?
Yeah.
In the US dollar, it doesn't matter if the US dollar is digital or not digital.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's finite. Exactly.
Yeah. So look, I want to ask you a bit about ICOs. I think that's important for our audience, but maybe before we do, because I know you did one for Celsius, maybe you could just start at the beginning, sort of define an ICO and tell people what it is, and then we'll talk about how you guys leveraged it.
Yeah. So ICO stands for initial coin offering, and I think the first one was something like 2014, but there was a big mania of ICOs in 2017. So something like, I think 16 or $17 billion worth of funding was originated through these initial coin offerings. Most of these offerings were overseas. Some of them included US investors. And for one reason or another, most ICOs did not register with the SEC or other regulators because they claimed that they were not securities. We decided to file a Reg D with the SEC. We're one of the very few companies that decided to do that. And when you're seeing a lot of kind of letters flying from the SEC saying to people, hey, you need to pay your money back, or you have to pay a fine, or you violated the law, it's because these companies didn't really follow the law. But you have to think about the ICO as like this Cambrian explosion of innovation on the blockchain. Really what it was a lot of mostly retail money chasing the next Google or the next Apple that people thought is going to come out of the blockchain. And that experiment is still going on. Today, we have kind of derivatives of that experiment that are called DeFi or CeFi and so on. But really, we're still experimenting to find the basically the killer app or the application, the utility that really is going to be what's going to take us to the next level.
So, for the startups folks, obviously this is really sort of predominate this conference. As cryptocurrency becomes more of a utility, do you see more startups leveraging ICOs, instead of traditional VCs for sources of funding?
Yeah, it's a great question because today, if you did an ICO, it would be very hard for you to raise the money unless you have some really exceptional circumstances. For us, it was very important because it was the seed of our community, right? So for us, we wanted to build a community of people that believe in our business model, in this idea that we promise to always act in your best interest. And so we brought in 1,500 participants. This was back in 2017. And then more recently, we've done another round where we had over 1,000 people participate. And we raised an additional $20 million. So for us, it was a huge way to really kickstart the community, scale the community. But for most projects, that is something that is very difficult to do, right? Because for us, all of our participants are also customers of ours, right? So they're all using the utility that we provide. Where in most businesses, when you get started, your investors or even your collaborators are not necessarily your customers. So I would recommend this as a mechanism if you can see that correlation between your community and your customer. It's definitely a great way to bring in either equity. It doesn't matter if it's equity or tokens. We happen to issue tokens, but since we give our users 80% of the revenues we create, equity in our companies is actually defined differently, or gets less of the benefits compared to the token itself, which represents our distribution to our communities.
Yeah. So look, this is the future of things to come. And I think our audience would like to know how, your prediction for Bitcoin is, how much is it going to go up and when? I mean, these are, obviously it's got the weather like, if you get sort of the stock market, but, obviously you're an expert and you're sort of deep in this space, Alex. So I think we would love to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah. So look, short term, I've said this many times this year that we're stuck in that range of 10 to 12,000. We visited the 12,000 level, the 10,000 level several times, and we're facing an election in 2 weeks. If the election is contested, right, then there's going to be a lot of stress, a lot of risk in the system, and people are going to be looking for this non-correlated asset. So Bitcoin behaves very well when there is a lot of stress or distress in the system, right? So, and it works similar to how gold works for professional investors. So I do expect the price to move dramatically up if we have a contested election. If we just have a normal election, I think it will still continue to go in that range of, it may go up to 14,000, which is the next level of resistance. But if it goes down for any reason, that is a great opportunity to buy it, because there's a pretty high chance that you will not see these levels below 10,000 ever again. So for those of you watching this who kept saying to themselves, oh, it was 4,000 and I didn't buy it, and it was 6,000 I didn't buy it, and then it was 10,000 I didn't buy it, because you're waiting for it to drop in value. That's just not the way to do it. The way to do it is to really buy a little bit every month, average your way in, close your eyes. You don't care about what the price is. You just once a month decide, okay, I'm going to buy $100 worth of Bitcoin every month, right? Or something like that. So again, this is not financial advice. I'm just telling you what I do and how I average in over a long period of time. If you did what I just said over the last 4 or 5 years, there would be only like 5 or 6 days in which you actually lost money, right? Because your average in would be always below the average price up. So I think for most people, and again, we talk about 5 or 10% of your asset, right? We're not talking, I don't recommend for anyone to go and put half of their money into Bitcoin because they're going to go and become rich. Bitcoin is basically insurance policy for doomsday. If doomsday comes, you're going to need it. If doomsday doesn't come, then there's a pretty good chance that your dollars are going to do just fine in your stock market and your retirement plan and your home, and everything that's denominated in dollar will continue to do fine. So it's more about just having a diversified portfolio and making sure that you're averaging your price in this insurance policy. You're just averaging your price up or down based on how much exposure you're looking for.
That's great. So Alex, as a serial entrepreneur, or somebody who obviously has been able to look at kind of macro trends and capitalize on them, and you said sort of starts by solving problems, doing good, and then doing well, beyond that. You've sort of started with voice over IP, money over IP. Is there something? What's the next kind of over IP that you see coming?
So look, Nikola Tesla, who's my hero, promised the world free electricity back in the turn of the century, 1901 actually, and most people discounted that and said that he was crazy, and and he never got to deliver that promise. So I think I'm a student of his work, and I think there is a way to do that. There is a way to deliver electricity, not necessarily through high capacity lines the way we do it today, even though he's the inventor of that technology, right? We use alternate currents every day to deliver that electricity. So if I'm done with Celsius and a few billion people use it, just like voice of IP, my next assignment is to deliver free electricity to everybody on the planet.
Wow. Money, electricity, voice, attacking all the big ones. That's great. Alex, so any, just I guess sort of in closing, we just got a couple of minutes again. So a lot of startups here, people sort of, moving in this space. Again, just what are some of the lessons that you've learned, during COVID, for example, as an entrepreneur? Like, how has your philosophy changed? Any advice for startup folks who don't have the experience that you do about how they can capitalize what they can learn from this experience as we go forward?
Yes, look, every calamity, every disaster is also an opportunity. And we can see that how well some of these digital services have done, like Zoom, the service we're using right now, for example, just exploded because of COVID. So my point to entrepreneurs who are struggling, or they had a shop or the store or something that really just got decimated, is that you just have to basically turn. You have to take a 180-degree turn, even if you're not an expert, and just look at, okay, what is the new world is going to look like? What's the post-COVID world is going to look like? And look at the opportunities. For example, U.S. manufacturing, right? I think manufacturing is coming back to the United States. I think all of us realize that sourcing everything from overseas is not the solution, because when everybody needs PPE, or when everybody needs some medicine, guess what? The other guys are just not going to ship it to us. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities that normally, if you said, oh, I'm going to start this kind of business, people would laugh at you. But because of COVID, there's a lot of new things that could happen. And the same is true with crypto, right? If you look at digital currencies, we had a tripling of demand, like overnight, basically, in March, since March, basically tripling of demand of everything we do, right? And people just started, people that we spoke to for years suddenly showed up and said, okay, I'm ready to go. How do we do this? How do we make an investment, and so on? So being in the right place at the right time is obviously an extremely important piece of this. But unless you're allowing yourself to make that 180-degree turn, if you're insisting on waiting for COVID to pass and you're going to reopen that restaurant and you think you're going to do great, there's a high chance you're going to fail. So you do have to help luck. And when you stumble upon luck, you don't just get up and walk away. You have to understand that this is an opportunity. So that's, it's easy to say that, it's hard to do it. And for all of us, again, you definitely source advice from other people who you see are taking advantage of this opportunity, because looks like they already understand how things are working, and you can basically rely on their judgment if you don't think your judgment is allowing you to make the right decisions.
Alex, fascinating discussion. I could go on for a long time, but we are out of time. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And it was good talking to you.
Thanks for having me, and good luck to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fred Bucher and Alex Mashinsky. Alex, it was fascinating to hear you talk about the comparison actually between the way the US government has, during this pandemic, cast this net, metaphor of the net you use to protect us by reflating the economy, printing money, creating further debt, and that with socialism and communism. Also about the potential benefits of cryptocurrencies and decentralization of assets during a time around the wider global context of the decline of the dollar, and being prepared for doomsday, which I think we've all found out is definitely something that is possible. So thank you so much to both of you for joining us. It's been a pleasure. That was fantastic, and we're going to move on to our next panel. So feel free.
Thanks, Fred.